Certain cameras have a sense of purity within them, the essence of a fundamental design idea that expresses itself through a physical object. Elegant mechanical solutions to problems experienced by the person who is making a picture. The blades of an aperture answers the question of how can I change the amount of light going through my lens. A rangefinder answers the question of how do I focus my lens without actually looking through it? And the SLR answers the question of how do I look through my lens and see exactly what I'm making a picture of? When these questions were first answered, those initial solutions had a sense of purity in them, something raw and visceral, something that feels close to instinct, almost like a physical manifestation of that sensation of being hit out of nowhere by an exciting idea. But over the years, as things get iterated upon, as a solution gets developed, technology advances, and the many factors that go into running a business begins to exert like a pressure onto an object. And over time, certain things are stripped away, and sometimes that purity is lost. Now fast forward to where we are today. Some cameras feel so far removed from that initial idea, that spark, that sensation of an answer. So when you come across a camera that still has that sense of purity, it's as clear as day. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. The Pentax 6.7, the icon of what a single lens reflex camera is. We're going to go over everything about the Pentax 6.7, the many things that I love about it, but also its biggest weakness, its Achilles heel, the one fundamental flaw that just might prevent it from being the camera for you. So let's jump right in. All the color pictures that you're about to see were developed with the Cinestill CS41 kit at home on a rotary processor. The Pentax 6.7 is an amazing camera, and the first thing that makes it special to me is its form. In the hands, it's pretty much the hardiest and the most heavily built camera that I've ever used. Everything about it is robust. It feels like if it knocks into something, that thing will get damaged, not the camera. Its back door is super solid and it feels tight, and when you squeeze it, there's no give at all. Its film advance is really nice, and most importantly, it brings to the picture making experience the purity of the SLR experience. You change the aperture on the lens and you adjust the shutter speeds on the top. And when you look through the viewfinder, there's a clean frame with the micro prism in the middle for focusing, and that's it. Similar to a Leica, it gives you an essential photographic experience. But unlike a Leica, there's no fashion aspect to the Pentax. No frills, no jewelry, no ornamentation or exotic leather, just exactly what you need to make a picture. It has an interchangeable top, so you could put in a metered prism like this one. Inside the viewfinder, you'll see a simple, elegant needle that goes up and down telling you where your exposure is at. And there are also waist level viewfinders too, so there's a whole host of different options available to you based on your preference. It's a relatively large and heavy camera. For example, with the 105mm f2.4 lens, it comes in just under 2.5 kg, which is 3 times the weight of a Leica, but it's still much lighter than, say, a large format camera. It features an interchangeable lens system, and that's the next thing that I love about the Pentax 6.7. And that is the glass that this system gives you access to and the sheer quality of the pictures that it produces. To me, some of the lenses in the Pentax 6.7 system rivals the best lenses that you're able to find in the world. And I don't mean in terms of just technical performance, but in terms of rendering, clarity, how it presents a scene, even in the toughest lighting conditions. Now, I wouldn't quite describe them as being the absolute best, but the lenses in the Pentax 6.7 are not far behind. They're really close. To me, they compare with, say, Leica M-mount glass, which is 10 to 20 times the price. They're as good as or slightly better than the glass in the Mamiya 7 system. Mamiya lenses are really sharp, but for some scenes they can look a bit modern and flat, whereas Pentax lenses have a bit more character and flavor to them, which I prefer. Now, I know this is debatable and some people prefer Mamiya glass to Pentax glass, but what is undeniable is that they're not leagues away from each other. And despite being close, Pentax lenses are generally cheaper. Right now, this camera goes for $500 for the body alone, and the lens, like the 105mm f2.4, which is the small format equivalent of about a 50mm f1.2 lens, also costs around $500. And think about that, you're able to get this exact kit a super high-performing 50 f1.2 lens, an amazingly built camera body, a kit that gives results as good as or better than systems that cost multiple $1,000s, all for just less than $1,000 US. So with this, you're getting a tremendous amount of value per dollar spent. Besides the glass, a big part of the sheer overall performance that this camera is able to deliver on is also down to the format that it uses. 6x7. It's much larger than 35mm film, and with that comes a sense of size, space, and three-dimensionality, an immersion into the frame, especially when printing big, that only a larger format can bring. In fact, this camera gives such good output that I've been using it interchangeably with my large format camera on certain long-term projects that I've been working on. When pictures made by this and a 4x5 camera are seen back to back, if I showed you prints in person without telling you which was which, especially when stopped down, most people would have a really hard time distinguishing between which was made on large format and which was made on the Pentax. So it's almost like you're getting a portable large format camera. It also kind of sits in like a sweet spot in terms of cameras, where you're getting the best of so many things. You're getting so close to the resolution and the output of a large format camera, but it's still handholdable, still relatively practical with 10 shots per roll, and say f2.4 when paired with higher speed film. You'll be able to use it in relatively low light as well. So it's very versatile. And on top of that, giving you that essential, pure, minimalist SLR experience, it almost seems like the Pentax 6.7 is a perfect camera. But sadly, it isn't. There are a few things about the Pentax 6.7 that it doesn't do so well. First off is its focusing screen. The viewfinder is pretty dim, and with most 6.7s, you'll be using a micro prism in the middle to grab focus. Being a larger format, lenses have a shallower depth of field, so you need to be more precise to get accurate focus when compared to, say, a smaller format. But with the stock focusing screen, while it's great in bright daylight, it's really challenging to use in dim situations, especially if you're not using a f2.8 lens. If you're using a f4.5 lens, by the time evening comes, it's pretty much impossible to grab focus on subjects that don't have a ton of contrast. That said, you can change focusing screens, but it's not an easy job. The focusing screens in the Pentax 6.7 are known to be very hard to get right, because when changing them, they also need to be calibrated to make sure that focusing is on point. And it's such a difficult job that it's widely known in the Pentax 6.7 circle that an average Joe camera technician probably won't be able to get it right. So they always recommend that if you want to change your focusing screen, be sure to always send it to someone who specializes in Pentax 6.7s. Your regular camera technician might specialize in Leicas or Hasselblads, but if he doesn't have specific experience with this, you might want to send the job to someone else. The second thing that the Pentax 6.7 doesn't do so well is its metering. Not how accurate the meter is, but how fragile it is. The way the meter works is via a chain on the inside, and this chain is a fragile one. It's known to get stuck or to break if you don't remove the prism in a specific order. For example, you're always told to never take the prism off the camera with the lens mounted, to always remove the lens first, followed by the prism. But even if you do that and you follow that exact procedure, which I've always done, I've had the chain break on me a couple of times, despite never ever removing the prism and never even changing a lens for one of my Pentax bodies. But just somehow with usage, the chain just breaks on its own. So over time, I've just opted to use a meterless prism with a spot meter, which is more accurate anyway. And if you do that, this downside of having a fragile meter chain becomes a non-issue. Now, those two things, a slightly dim viewfinder that is quite tricky to focus with, and a meter chain that is fragile, those are relatively small things. But there is one big flaw with the Pentax 6.7 that to me either makes it or breaks it as a camera for you. This is the biggest one, and that is its usable shutter speeds. This camera has a gigantic mirror and a huge shutter, a mirror so big that they released a version of it called the MLU, or the mirror lockup version, with a separate button on the side that allows you to be able to flip the mirror up so that when you are making a picture, the mirror slapping up doesn't cause the whole camera to shake when using slower shutter speeds. So here's the procedure for slow shutter speeds. Say you want to shoot at 1/8 of a second. You mount your camera to a tripod, you focus, flip the mirror lockup button, wait a few seconds for everything to stabilize, then you depress your cable release very gently to trigger the shutter. But despite doing that, and being very disciplined with your technique. I found that no matter what I did, when using slower shutter speeds, everything from half a second to 1/30th, sometimes even 1/60th of a second, I always got slightly blurry pictures, even with a rock solid tripod head, a stable tripod, and good disciplined technique. When I first experienced this, it drove me mad, but diving deeper into the internet forums on this topic, I found that there are many conflicting opinions. Some people claim that the vibration was greatly exaggerated, and over their 10 years of using it, they've only gotten camera shake a couple of times. Others say that it's a known, proven issue and that this is just a thing that happens. Well, I'm here to tell you that for me personally, I found that for specific ranges of shutter speeds, I've always got very slightly blurry pictures. Now, when I say slightly blurry, it's not blur enough to the point where viewing it at say 8:10, you'd see it. For example, with this picture, when viewed as a whole, one might call it sharp. But that's because I applied quite a lot of sharpening in post to hide that blurriness. When zooming in, it's very obvious to me. And this is something that has happened to me almost every time I used a slow shutter speed with a Pentax 6.7, even on a tripod. To the point where today, if I need to use anything under 1/25th of a second, even with a tripod with a cable release, I'm still putting my Pentax 6.7 away. But wait, is this slight blurring really a huge deal? Well, in general, for my small format work, I almost never zoom in to check sharpness. And that's because when using a smaller format, what I value is the picture as a whole. It's almost like a different headspace of picture making. The best example of this is, say, if you have shot Polaroids before. You know, when you shoot a Polaroid, knowing that you're not going to scan it and print it huge, that awareness kind of shapes your picture making. And you tend to make pictures in a way that serves that small format. But with a larger format, I'm looking for articulation. I want detail. I want fidelity. And all the intricacies and descriptive properties of the tiny things all over the frame, the details become almost like a part of the vocabulary of the picture. And that descriptive power aids the expression of the picture. And so for those kinds of pictures, articulation matters to me. And so that slight slurring that the camera shake brings to slow shutter speeds on the Pentax 6.7 is a big hindrance for me. Because with this camera, when I make a picture that I'm happy with the larger viewing experience in mind before I even make the picture, wanting to harness the power of description, the last thing I want is to make a big print and see blurring. Now, whether or not this is going to be a big deal for you depends on what you're looking for and how you normally shoot. If you generally just view pictures as a whole, or you're always using it handheld in bright light, using faster ISO speed film, then it's not going to be a problem at all. And some people online also suggest using a very big heavy tripod or trying to weigh it down with a bag to help reduce camera shake. But for me personally, I've yet to find success with any of those solutions. And especially because I scan my 6.7 work at about 100 megapixels, when I zoom in, I really see any imperfections. So if you want to do that too, that's something that you'd want to consider. But all that said, for the money, you're still paying only less than $1,000 for some of the best glass in the world, coupled with amazing build quality, a beautiful shooting experience, and despite all the flaws that I mentioned in this video, for the money, I still think that the Pentax 6.7 is a beast, and I'm not selling mine anytime soon. So if you're looking to add one to your toolbox for that higher fidelity picture, I 100% think that this camera is worth exploring. That's all for today's video. Jeremy here. If you enjoyed that, let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.